Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 53, we will talk about urban poverty alleviation. So, the different concepts that we will cover are on urban poverty alleviation, and we will look into how to implement no poverty programs in ULBs. Then we will talk about the National Mission for Financial Inclusion, or the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Then we will talk about how to reduce or how to achieve zero hunger in ULBs. Then we will talk about the public distribution system, and finally the National Health Mission, or also known as Poshan Abhijan. Now, when we talk about urban poverty alleviation, we have already talked about that this goes hand in hand with urban economic and social development. So, SDG 1 and SDG 2 relates to no poverty and zero hunger, but at the same point of time, some of the schemes that we will discuss, we have already mentioned them in the previous lecture, where we have talked about overall social development. Particularly, SDG 1 talks about eradication of extreme poverty, so that we have to make sure that people don't suffer from extreme poverty. So that's the first target. Of course, it takes time to reduce poverty. Suddenly a city or a country cannot become rich, but we can at least try to eradicate the extreme poverty part, so that people have at least certain basic necessities of life. So in general poverty, to reduce poverty by at least 50%, that means bringing the people under poverty, certain levels of poverty, like certain below poverty line and all people, to make it half of that, to make it reduce it by 50%. Implement nationally appropriate social protection system. Again, these are national programs, but again implemented at the ULB level. Equal rights to ownership, basic services, technology and economic resources. This is again looks into equality of people. Build resilience to environment, economic and social disaster. Poor are the ones who suffer the most from any kind of disaster, so that we have to be very careful about. Then mobilization of resources to end poverty and establishment of poverty eradication policy frameworks at all levels. So these are means to work targets for this particular SDG 1. For SDG 2, the targets are more or less linked, you can say, ending hunger and improving access to food. Of course, if you have money, then you can buy food. So poverty and hunger is related. Ending all forms of malnutrition. This is where certain kinds of groups, certain vulnerable groups like people living in slums or people with below poverty line, people, there may be malnutrition. There is a lot of malnutrition, and that is leading to stunted growth among the children and all. So that has to be looked into. Then coming to agricultural productivity, sustained food production system, genetic diversity of seeds. So these are more or less considerations at the country level, not at the ULB level. And finally, investment, research and technology addressing trade restrictions and distortions, which is more about the how the world operates or how the world trades between each other. So those concerns has to be also addressed. Again, these are not directly related with the task at the ULBs or the responsibilities of the ULBs. So we would mostly discuss about malnutrition, food access, or poverty reduction in urban areas. Now, ending poverty in ULBs, of course, some of it can be only happen when every people have a job. For that, skills has to be developed. So we have discussed that in the previous lecture, skill development and provision of jobs and all. But in general, people should have universal access to housing and homeless shelters, water and sanitation, jobs and employment, financial services, social protection, wage entitlements information, and redress mechanisms and legal aid. So that means everybody in a society should have access to legal aid if he wants. That means if certain bad things happens to a person, he should immediately get a legal aid. There should not be any hindrance to get that. Similarly, every person should know what he is entitled to get from his as wage, right? So all these are basic requirements for a society, and that has to be ensured. So this is the first target, you can say. Then formation of self-help groups. That means sometimes we have to generate people have to come together to get certain services or avail certain services. So for that, creation of self-help groups is important. Women's employment, access to finance, ownership and control of resources. Why women's? Because women's are you can say, they tie the entire family together. Women are the ones, if it's proven that if a job is given to a woman, the entire family benefits, unlike if it is given to the male, sometimes it may not benefit the entire family. So it's to improve women's employment, access to finance, ownership, all these things has to be looked into. Schemes specifically for urban poor, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, minorities and women. So these are specific schemes for the vulnerable groups. Then income generation via career counseling, skill training, entrepreneurship. So we have discussed this in the previous lecture. Resilience to extreme climate events and other environmental shocks. Like for example, in case of cyclone, the poor people are the ones who mostly suffer. So how to build systems so that they can, or how to build services which will be able to make them take care of this particular shocks, or they can overcome these shocks. Then participation of all social groups in need assessment, that what the society requires, what sort of programs has to be implemented, social services planning and implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of the services that are being provided. So that means all social groups should participate in determining what should be provided, in the actual provision of services, and for monitoring of those services. So what can we do at the ULB level? Of course, we have to gather data, create maps, and we have to also track certain measures. So first job is to identify who are the urban poor, what should be the criteria to determine urban poor, slum dwellers, destitutes and others who are critically vulnerable to shocks and certain shocks and disasters, so that we can reach them in case of a disaster. We know exactly where to reach with aid or whom to safeguard. Data and maps on spaces and incidents of discrimination against women, SC/STs, minorities and persons with disabilities. This will also help us to understand and eventually reduce this kind of discrimination practices. And identification of new and relevant technologies and opportunities for involving businesses, NGOs and other stakeholders. So, in most urban planning at the ULB level, the planning should be pro-poor. That means we should put definite considerations for the poor people. We cannot plan only for the rich. Then operational guidelines for care and protection of destitutes and vulnerable groups in that urban area. Convergence of ULB funds and programs, how to bring together different funds and programs to help the poor. Urban poverty surveys and vulnerability assessment at ward and municipality level, including specific data on marginalized groups. So surveys has to be done so that we gather data to know whom to reach with certain programs and certain schemes. Then train and capacitate urban service providers to reduce harassment of poor. For example, poor are harassed for availing any kind of urban services. Either you go to the police station or you go to an electric company. Every time the poor suffers. Why? Because they are not literate. Many of them are not literate. Many of them don't know the difference, the procedures. They are not. Very open to this kind of new technologies and all. So all this creates a lot of hurdles, and that leads to their harassment. So there has to be specific capacity training of the staff or the urban service providers so that this kind of harassment could be prevented. So certain protection measures for the urban poor. This could the National Mission for Financial Inclusion or the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana is designed as certain protection measures. So this targets to ensure universal banking access. Now, if a banking access is given, then only everything else that comes along with it, like provision of credit, insurance, all these things can be provided. So first job is to provide bank accounts to everybody. So this could help in getting pension eventually, so that this same accounts could be used for pension, remittance, and savings and deposits for these people. So this could be opened in any bank branch or via some facilitators such as bank mitras or certain outlets at the community level, which could be created by this kind of facilitators, like this bank mitra outlets. And this kind of account should be opened with zero balance, but only in case a person wants to avail ATM services or wants to use checkbooks, then he have to deposit certain amount of minimum balance, so that the banks could be also able to meet those uh, cost for providing this kind of services. But for other people, if they just want to do transactions at the bank, everything is free. So three primary schemes which comes under this particular Yojana, that is PM Jivan Jyoti Bima, which provides life insurance worth rupees 2 lakhs for just at rupees 436 rupees per year, and age group covered is 18 to 50 years, and the life cover is given till age of 55 years. Then PM Suraksha Bima Yojana, that is to provide accident insurance of 2 lakhs for just 20 rupees per year. And finally, Atal Pension Yojana for poor people, which provides pension up to rupees 5,000 a month depending on the contribution, and people from age group 18 to 40 years can avail this particular pension scheme. So that is how government can create certain kind of social securities, so that people can at least have, these are the safeguards that we can provide to society, so that it can give a more healthy or a more satisfying life to the different poor people. Then coming to zero hunger in ULBs, this is another target, SDG target: end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So this can be achieved through integrating food distribution programs, and food distribution programs like ration programs in India. These are where we distribute food to the poor people at a subsidized rate, of course. But this has to be linked with other programs also, such as programs related with health services, where sometimes nutritional supplements and all these things are given to the kids and all, and also the education programs where at the schools we provide midday meals or we provide ration at the schools and so on. So all this can be linked together, so that overall people are not subjected to hunger. That means at least the basic necessities should be provided to people. So what can the ULB do? At the ULB level, we can do growth monitoring of children under 6 years to see if the people at different parts of the city or at certain areas of the city, they are growing at the way they should be. So for that, we have to cover pregnant and lactating women, adolescent girls, and they could be covered under the ICDS Supplementary Nutrition Program, Integrated Child Development Service Scheme, where nutritional supplements are given for these people. Then taking home rations for children under 3 years from schools and by pregnant and lactating mothers. So these rations are provided at home directly. Then quality midday meals at schools, public distribution system, distribution of food grains and affordable prices, and credible data and even real-time data and regular review of this distribution system. That means if the subsidized grains which are provided by the government, is it really reaching the poor people or the people whom they are designed to reach or who deserve actually. So that has to be looked into via this kind of, in the ULBs, and this kind of monitoring has to be done. So the different actions that the ULB can take directly, it can first check, it can enroll families under the public distribution schemes. So that means which people are eligible for this kind of public distribution schemes, that could be facilitated, that could be verified, and then this could be sponsored by the ULB. Enrollment of children, pregnant women, and adolescent girls under the Integrated Child Development Scheme. So again, whom to enroll, who to provide this kind of services, that to determine, and even eventual provision of these services could be done at the ULB level. enrollment of elderly people under the old age pension scheme. So we will discuss this later also. Information, education and communication on nutrition education. So these are awareness campaigns that can be conducted by the ULB so that people are aware of the nutrition requirements of the children and other groups. System of community support for nutrition for vulnerable groups. So there has to be some programs designed maybe via the primary health centers, via the wellness centers, so that pregnant and lactating women, adolescent children under 3 and elderly, or maybe via this ICDS program, they are having support, nutritional support. Urban rooftop agricultural farms could be set up. Locally available nutritious food so that we get good food in urban areas. Then campaigns on breastfeeding of children and capacity for adoption to climate change. So these are some of the aspects which can be covered when we talk about eradicating hunger in the ULB levels, at the level of ULB, sorry. Now, coming to the public distribution system in India, it was established by the National Food Security Act in 2013. And along with this, we have the midday meal scheme and the other welfare schemes which are looking into supporting people with nutrition or food. And usually the Food Corporation of India and other different state agencies, they are the ones who procure food grains directly from the farmers. And they procure the food grains at a minimum support price guarantee so that the farmers are also benefited. And once these food grains are procured, then they are distributed via fair price shops under the public distribution system at much subsidized rates. So this could be either subsidized from the state government or from the central government as well. So usually the economically weak are the ones who get this kind of food grains at subsidized prices. And the Department of Food and Public Distribution, Department of Food, these are the ones who are responsible for procurement, storage and distribution of food grains. Whereas Department of Consumer Affairs looks into the aspects where consumers, they make aware like what are the consumer rights, they protect the consumer interest, they also set up standards for for this kind of services and also prevents black marketing. So you can see that this kind of distribution system has to be approached from two sides. One is to make sure that we design a good distribution system, and on the other side, it has to look into from the consumer side where we see the consumers are protected. We should see that the food grains are not stolen. We should see that there is no black marketing or hoarding of food grains and so on. So from both sides, we have to monitor this system, and these are done at the ULB level, of course. Some of the issues with this kind of public food distribution system are leakages in the PDS system, where intended beneficiaries do not get the food because of or damage to the food or pilferage of the food and so on. Some is due to exclusion errors, that is, for some poor households who are supposed to get this food, they are not entitled, they don't have PDS cards. So that means these people have to be entitled. These people have to be given this PDS cards and all. Or there are inclusion errors as well, where people who are not supposed to get these benefits, but they are unduly getting these benefits. Maybe they were earlier, they belong to this category, but now they are well off, but still they are availing this kind of rations and so on. So this has to be checked, and we have to make sure the deserving gets the benefits. So this kind of checkings can be done at the urban level. For example, we can put real-time GPS trackers in the vehicles. We can see the food grain distribution vehicles where they are traveling, so that we know that some illegal activity is not happening. Then we can use electronic weighing machine which are GPRS enabled, and along with that we have got GPRS enabled handheld billing machines, so that when people are being sold this kind of goods, they are given the exact amount in terms of weight and also the payment they are making. So that could be determined, so we know exactly how much is being sold. So the shops which try to bend the process, or they want to do some illegal activity, they can be prevented from doing that. And this could be, this is a real-time system. The data can be updated and put into the central database as well. So that is how the entire system could be monitored at real time, and we can prevent this kind of pilferages and so on. Then coming to the National Health Mission or the Poshan Abhijan, this is focused on making India free from malnutrition by the year 2022. So this was initiated by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So this was focused towards reduction of stunting among children, undernutrition and anemia among children, women and adolescent girls. And usually the Anganwadi services are availed so that this kind of programs could be taken up, and holistic development and adequate nutrition are offered to the pregnant women, mothers and children through this particular program. So the target was to cover 315 districts by 2017-18, then 235 districts by 2018-19, and every other district by 2020. So the target was to reduce stunting by 2% per annum, or overall target was to reduce it from existing 38.4% to 25% by 2022. So that is the target for reducing stunted development among children. So to do this at the ULB level, ICT-based real-time monitoring system was given to Anganwadi workers to measure the growth of to children. So all this data was tracked, and registers. Earlier registers were used by the Anganwadi workers, so these were eliminated. Several departments which are doing work on malnutrition, they are brought together, health departments and other departments, and overall the schemes, there is convergence of the schemes so that eventually the beneficiaries are benefited. Then height recording of children at Anganwadi centers so that we can measure stunted growth or so on. Certain social audits, nutrition resource centers where people are given information about nutrition and so on, and overall involving the masses through Jan Andolan. So these are some of the salient features of this particular program which has been adopted. So these are, as you can see, that all these programs, these are several government programs, these are set up from time to time. So this is the target was 2022, maybe this would get extended or new programs would come. So each of these program has got some targets to eliminate hunger or eliminate malnutrition or eliminate certain kinds of stunting or reduce stunting. So each program has this kind of targets, and based on the different SDG goals or based on the goals set by our constitution and the 12th schedule, we have to provide this kind of services. We have to provide general services as well as we have to conduct this kind of special programs so that we can achieve certain targets. So that is how we have to design. Eventually, in future also, this kind of schemes needs to be designed. So depending on these strategies or how the schemes are implemented and all, future schemes can also be designed as well as implemented. So these are some of the references that you can study. To conclude, eradicating extreme poverty and hunger are key to countries' and societies' development. The role of ULB is that of a facilitator for implementing various government schemes and programs. And again, there has to be constant and sustained effort from the ULB's part to do this kind of programs. Thank you.